Poets and Writers was for me an invitation to a literary life long before I had a sense that a literary life was available to me.
When I need inspiration, I turn to poets and writers.
When I want useful literary news, I turn to poets and writers.
When I want to be in community with my community, I turn to poets and writers.
When I want to give beginning writers the best information on where to turn for publication and prizes.
When I want to find a community of writers.
When I want to get paid as a writer or pay other writers.
When I want to organize a Spanish language writing workshop accessible to the immigrant community to which I belong.
When I want to discover all the things I have neglected and forgotten to do as a professional, I turn to poets and writers.
Hello there. You can probably tell I live a long way from New York City. So when I need to keep abreast of what's going on in the publishing industry, I turn to poets and writers.
When I need to connect with my fellow writers in the national, regional, or local community.
When I want to go deeper into craft.
When I want to feel like I'm part of a writing community.
When I need a reminder of why I do this.
When I want to remember why I do this.
When I'm curious about what's animating the wider literary landscape in this country, I turn to poets and writers.
Good evening. We're here to celebrate poets and writers. I'm Joy Harjo, and I'm honored to have been asked to open this celebration, this gathering, with a poem. I picked the kitchen table poem, or perhaps the world ends here, because I like to imagine us all right now sitting around a big table, sharing stories, poems, laughing, eating, and remembering the high and low points of this year, and talk about our plans. And I like the idea of the kids running around and just all of us here saying, okay, here we are. And it's been rough, but here we are. And we move forward with our stories, and we move forward with poetry. And we move forward together, because that is the only way we're going to move forward. Perhaps the world ends here. The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women. At this table, we gossip, recall enemies and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us and at our poor falling down selves. As we put ourselves back together once again at the kitchen table. This table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. Wars have begun and ended at this table. It is a place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table, while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite.
Good evening. Welcome to writers, readers, and book lovers everywhere. Welcome to this evening's program in celebration of writers. It is my pleasure to be your host, and I'm so glad that you've joined me to support poets and writers. Since 1970, writers have turned to poets and writers for information about how to get published, for encouragement and validation, for financial support of community literary events, and perhaps most importantly of all, for connection with other writers. In a time of isolation and disruption, it is truly my pleasure to gather with you around the proverbial kitchen table, so beautifully invoked by Joy Harjo, to celebrate the importance of writers in this moment. Writing and storytelling is an essential part of who I am and who we are as a society. It allows us to create a pathway to experience things that we may not have had contact with in our daily lives, especially if you grow up in a marginalized or disadvantaged community. My love of reading and storytelling came from my parents. My mother was a college librarian. My father was dyslexic and had challenges with reading until he was in his 30s because he went undiagnosed. Despite this, he still told some of the most fantastic stories, and together, our parents made sure we had access to all the books we could get our hands on. Those poems and stories symbolized a broader world that was available to me and my 5 siblings. I remember reading Louisa May Alcott, Gwendolyn Brooks, Richard Wright, and Charles Dickens, and getting to explore other worlds that reminded me of my own, but also gave me a different vantage point. Later on in life, as I began to write novels under the pen name Selena Montgomery, I sought to write stories that highlighted the complexities of Black women, stories that painted us as adventurous, attractive, ambitious, and ultimately human. I've had the pleasure of writing 8 romantic suspense novels under my pen name, 2 works of nonfiction under my real name, and my first political thriller, While Justice Sleeps, will be released on May 11th. Now, many people ask me how I balance being both a writer and a political leader. The truth is, the principles that undergird these facets of my life are identical. I believe in the independence of people, especially women and those who are often unseen and unheard in our society. I believe in creating space for those who do not often see themselves reflected in our larger narrative by removing barriers, or better, giving them the tools they need to remove and dismantle those barriers on their own. During an uncertain time in our nation's history, as we witness unprecedented attacks on our democracy, writing and storytelling help ground us and remind us of who we are and of our power. Your words have validated our pain and our frustration with the many challenges that we face as a nation. A pandemic that has reshaped every facet of our lives, the wrenching pain of systemic injustice plaguing communities of color, and economic upheaval that is leaving working families behind. But your words have also given us hope during these turbulent times, and they have served as a refuge for those looking for an escape from their daily lives or affirmation that we're in it together. Like me, poets and writers believe that a thriving democracy is fed by a robust literary life, where many voices are heard and valued. Thank you for lifting your voices and working to uplift the voices of those who deserve to be heard during such a time as this. And now we have a musical treat for you from the poet Cornelius Edie and the Cornelius Edie Trio. This is Sunshine.
Me and my baby sitting in the rain, waiting on the sun to shine. Mr. Blues, go back to from where you came, waiting on the sun to shine. Want to know how it feels in the captain seat, waiting on the sun to shine. Drop me off with your ass and central needs, waiting on the sun to shine. Say, oh, hanging in the sky, waiting on the sun to shine. Sun starts shining, moon got too high, waiting on the sun to shine. Sick and tired, listening to the blues, waiting on the sun to shine. About to graduate to something new, waiting on the sun to shine. Me and my baby at the end of the world, waiting on the sun to shine. That's over the cracks shine. Anybody like me, we'll miss you, son. Waiting on the sun to shine. Yeah, waiting on the sun to shine. Yeah, waiting on the sun to shine.
I know it's evening, but spring is coming and I can just about feel that sunshine. Goodness knows we're all longing for it. It is now my pleasure to introduce Don Weisberg, the CEO of Macmillan Publishers and the Gala Chair.
Thank you, Stacy. To be introduced by you is a great honor. You have single-handedly altered the coordinates of our country's charted course. The ability to vote in free and fair elections is what our society is built around. Your vision, your voice, and most importantly, your leadership are an inspiration to all of us. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Weisberg, Chief Executive Officer for Macmillan Publishers. I am privileged to be the Gala chairperson for tonight's celebration of poets and writers, and I want to thank you for joining us. While many of you tuned in tonight will be familiar with the work and service of poets and writers, some of you may not be. Poets and Writers is an organization for the more than 50 years has worked behind the scenes to establish a community, to foster opportunity, to promote awareness, to support the creative process through development, communication, and outreach. The mission of Poets and Writers is rooted in the belief that literature is vital to sustaining a vibrant culture. Now more than ever, that directive is critical. Poets and Writers was founded in 1970, and in the half-century since, they have created, grown, and sustained an incredible platform for writers. Macmillan is a longtime supporter of Poets and Writers, which from the beginning has provided programs and services free of charge, establishing access to information to all writers, helping to break down barriers, and enabling writers of all backgrounds to make their voices heard. Aspiring writers everywhere hoping ultimately to publish, who want and need information about how to begin honing their craft, turn to Poets and Writers. Their online databases of writing contests, agents, small presses, and publishing information are invaluable and trusted resources. Your donations enable Poets and Writers to sustain its essential programming and so much more. As you will hear throughout this evening, Poets and Writers helps writers to get their work out into the world, thus enriching the lives of all of us who are readers, and in turn contributing to intellectual curiosity and discovery, as well as sparking the conversations, ideas, and experiences necessary to the ongoing evolution of our society. And tonight's big news is that together, we, or you, have raised more than $900,000 this year. I am grateful to my colleagues at Macmillan, particularly Catherine Marvin, Erin Coffey, Sheila Roche, and Bill Barry, for their work in making this evening so successful. I'd also like to thank those companies and individuals who joined us as leaders in this effort. First among these is the premier underwriter of this evening's event, Penguin Random House, and my dear friend Madeline McIntosh. Thank you also to our lead underwriters, Michelle and David Baldacci, and James Patterson. And to our underwriters, Apple Books, Audible, Dan Brown, Maureen and David Egan, Hachette Book Group, HarperCollins Publishers, and the Anne and Richard Sarnoff Family Foundation. Our gratitude extends to all of you who contributed. You are a vital part of the effort in sharing our success. This has been a challenging year in ways that each of us individually and all of us collectively know too well. To have raised the amount of money that we have speaks not only to your incredible generosity, but also to your prioritization of the ongoing importance of the task at hand. We all know that America and the world are at a crossroads, and the work we do to give voice to and to create pathways for ideas, for dialogue, for writing is integral to our progress and betterment. At Macmillan, as with every publisher in this virtual room, we are in the business of discovery, and the discovery of new voices is our passion. Poets and Writers is in the business of helping these new voices be heard, thus helping all of us make connections. Tonight is a testament to the power of the written word and the gift to all of us that is reading. Along with having the honor of chairing this event, I am filled with gratitude to be sharing this evening's program with such awe-inspiring individuals. Oprah Winfrey, you are and have long been a force for good in this world. You have arguably brought more readers to books than anyone on this planet. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce my good friend, the indomitable and unstoppable Amy Berkauer, President of the Board of Poets and Writers. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Don. It's so good to see you. I didn't realize how much I missed you.
It's been a while, but we are going to see each other soon, I presume.
I hope so. So, Don, I want to thank you for saying yes. I want to thank you for your incredible support of Poets and Writers this year. Poets and Writers is very grateful to have you and Macmillan in our corner. I also want to say that one of the best things about the publishing business, besides all the great books, are the people. And I don't want to embarrass you, but I truly feel that you are one of the best. So I cannot thank you enough.
Well, thank you, Amy. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot more coming from you.
On behalf of the board, I want to reiterate Don's thanks to every single person who has made a contribution. It makes a big difference, especially in a tough year like this one. If you haven't made a contribution and you'd like to do so, there's still time. All you have to do is click on Donate, which is on the right-hand corner of your screen, or text PW Gala to 44321. It's been a year of great change all over the world, and at Poets and Writers as well. Elliot Figman, our beloved executive director for 40 years, stepped down at the end of 2020. Elliot, a poet himself, is truly the heart and soul of Poets and Writers. It's impossible to overestimate how much we are going to miss him, but we're thrilled that he's going to continue on the board. Elliot, I'm sure all our guests and writers throughout the country will join me in thanking you for your 4 decades of service to writers. Please raise a glass to Elliot or give him the equivalent of whatever is a virtual standing ovation. And now it is my honor to introduce Melissa Ford Gradle, our new executive director. Melissa was our managing director for 11 years. In her short time as executive director, she has proven to have the fortitude to guide us through what we expect will be some challenging years, and she has the imagination to take us in bold new directions. Melissa?
Thank you so much, Amy. It's an honor to follow Elliot Figman, with whom I have worked closely for more than a decade. I'm so grateful to Elliot and to you, Amy, and to the entire fantastic board. It's a board that truly supports our mission. And I'm really excited about leading the brilliant, dedicated, creative staff at Poets and Writers. I want to acknowledge the really terrific work that they've been doing under very difficult circumstances. We've all been working at home, of course, for the past year, and I'm so proud of what we've been able to accomplish. So here are just a few highlights. Thanks to Elliot's leadership, we established the Poets and Writers COVID-19 Relief Fund, and we were able to offer emergency grants to 150 writers in 33 states. The Poets and Writers Complete Guide to Being a Writer was published by Avid Reader Press last April and will continue to be an indispensable resource. We adapted our programs in order to support writers exploring the possibilities of virtual events, and we helped to amplify the voices of BIPOC writers by creating special grant opportunities for writers to curate and present online literary programs. Our editorial staff covered the pandemic and its impact on writers, as well as the nation's reckoning with racial justice as it pertains to the publishing and literary communities. Your contributions tonight will allow us to keep building on a remarkable history of service to writers. The funds raised tonight will sustain Poets and Writers magazine, the award-winning publication that writers everywhere turn to for trustworthy information and inspiration. Your contribution also supports the Readings and Workshops program, which funds writers giving readings and leading writing workshops in community-based settings all over the country. Through Readings and Workshops, we support about 2,000 events every year. That's an average of 5 events every day. United States of Writing is a new initiative that we're piloting in Detroit, Houston, and New Orleans to help writers build community. Stay tuned as United States of Writing expands to more cities in the years ahead. Our website is a treasure trove of useful information for writers, and we've just added a significant new feature, Poets and Writers Groups. It's a peer-to-peer networking tool to facilitate writing groups, and it's offered entirely for free. Your contributions make all of this possible, so the overwhelming success of this evening's event is truly heartening. We have raised over $900,000. You can help us reach our goal by making a donation now. Click the donate button in the top right corner of your screen or text PW Gala to 44321. That's PW Gala to 44321. And thank you very much.
For there to be a real democracy of letters, writers need access to the institutions of letters. Not based on their connections or savvy, but simply because they are writers. Poets and Writers is that access, and that is why it is so vital.
As a graduate student at NYU in the 90s and a young poet trying to make it in New York City, Poets and Writers was my literary and publishing Bible.
Poets and Writers had an online forum that I managed to join one-handed with this sleeping baby on my shoulder. And through that, I found my writing community again.
Thanks to Poets and Writers, I've been able to provide workshops for Latino and Ethiopian preschool-aged children here in the district. I've also been able to create paid public reading opportunities for my older immigrant students in the Write Who You Are program. And it's such an incomparable opportunity for them when their voices are heard.
I'm thinking about the first time this magazine changed my life, and it was from an article which I didn't even read in an issue. It was a copy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, and you could tell because some of the words were barely legible, but it was something circulated around like this sort of precious information. Everything about publishing that your publisher won't tell you, everything about selling your book, about, making your book count, that the people who are even in charge of doing that won't do for you. And it blew my mind. It opened up so many possibilities, and it was an article that was a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, and it changed my life. And Poets and Writers continues to do that, and I can imagine, at least I can, the person right now who's reading that kind of article that opens up and changes everything.
Thanks to a Poets and Writers BIPOC Writers Grant, this fall I was able to facilitate a series of poetry and creative nonfiction workshops with New Orleans undocumented youth, where they could confirm that their voices are important. And as an undocumented creative myself, that's exactly the message I need to hear.
Whenever young writers tell me they don't know what to do next, after the MFA program or the Writers Conference or even just a day at their desk, I send them to Poets and Writers.
When I want to know what's happening in the world of writing, I turn to Poets and Writers.
When I want to feel electrified in my writing, I turn to Poets and Writers.
Poets and Writers was a godsend. I just feel like I grew up with this organization. So I'm so pleased that we both reached this age together.
Wow. It is just incredible to hear about all of the ways Poets and Writers has touched so many writers over the years and continues to do so to this day.
Well, speaking about incredible, how in the world do you have time to write novels?
Well, number one, writing is part of my blood. It's what I do. But I have learned that it's really easy to write when you know you've got a deadline looming. Well, Melissa, it is now my true pleasure and honor to introduce tonight's special guest, Oprah Winfrey. Last year, poets and writers selected Miss Winfrey to receive the 2020 Leadership Award, but the event was, of course, canceled as stay-at-home orders were implemented in the early weeks of the pandemic. We are thrilled to have an opportunity to acknowledge Miss Winfrey this evening. The Poets and Writers Leadership Award honors an individual who has transformed and enlivened the field. Certainly there is no one who better exemplifies that description than Oprah Winfrey. When she started Oprah's Book Club in 1996 as part of the Oprah Winfrey Show, long before virtual meetings were in vogue, I might add, she became the moderator of the biggest book club the world has ever known. The book club has gone through several transformations and continues now in partnership with Apple Books. What I'm struck by, though, is the range of writing she has chosen over the years. Many wonderful contemporary books, of course, but also classic titles by William Faulkner, Leo Tolstoy, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and of course, several books by the singular Toni Morrison. You truly get a sense of what an adventurous reader Oprah is. When she selected a recent title for the book club, the author was assured of gigantic sales. It was as good as winning the lottery. But if you think about it, it was really readers who benefited most. An author like Toni Morrison, one of the towering figures of American literature, we can all agree that she was great, would be read forever. She needed no boost from Oprah. But the boost that Oprah provided was delivered to readers. Thanks to Oprah, readers all over America, all over the globe, discovered Toni Morrison. Oprah invited us in, told us that these works, from Tolstoy to Morrison, have meaning for our own lives. Along the way, she has been willing to embrace difficult conversations that needed to be had. In this way, she has modeled how readers can engage with the ideas and the challenges of our times, even some very uncomfortable ones. And she has done more than perhaps anyone else in our time to connect writers with readers and to keep books front and center in our cultural discourse. To help us celebrate poets and writers this evening, Miss Winfrey invited two authors to join her in thinking about what it means to be writing now. Let's listen in as she talks with Isabel Wilkerson, author of Cast, and Cheryl Strayed, known to many as Dear Sugar, and the author of Wild.
Thank you so much, Stacey Abrams. Thank you all for being here with us tonight as we honor the work and words of authors. So I say hello, everybody. This is truly an event with my favorite kind of people, poets and authors. So it's so nice to gather this evening, even virtually, me from my garden in Maui, to talk to you all. So I want to say thank you to the poets and writers for the honor of the Leadership Award. I really need no awards because I just love books and the spreading of books to anyone who will listen. I've been doing that for as long as I can remember. So I just want to say thank you for the Leadership Award and giving me the opportunity to be in the presence of so many great writers and poets this evening. So I have brought with me tonight, because I wanted to do something a little different, two incredible authors who also happen to have both been selected by me for the Oprah's Book Club. And I selected them because at the time that I first read Wild, it was life-changing to me personally because it allowed me to see courage from a different point of view. And I think I actually became more courageous after reading it. And then Isabel Wilkerson's book, Cast, changed me forever. So I'll be talking with Isabel Wilkerson and Cheryl Strayed. So please help me in welcoming both of them. Thank you for being here tonight. Hey, Cheryl.
Hi, Oprah. It's so wonderful to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Well, earlier tonight, U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo, who I've also talked to on Supercell Sunday, graced us with a poem. And earlier this year, I think America was mesmerized. We were surprised by our collective pride in hearing Amanda Gorman recite her beautiful inauguration poem, The Hill We Climb. I was so proud, actually, of the way she just kind of stepped into the moment in that beautiful Prada coat. And I just wanted to ask you, what went through your mind as you saw the response and why you think that resonated so strongly?
I agree. It was such a powerful moment to see that young woman stand up there and read those words she wrote. I think it made me so proud. I'm always proud when I see other poets and writers speak their truth, stand in their courage and their strength, and share their vision of beauty. I think what was so powerful in particular to me about hearing Gorman's poem is that it was offering us a vision of America that I think was really honest, that it demanded something of us. It didn't gloss over the painful parts of our nation, the wounds that we still need to heal. It instead said, here they are. I'm going to show them to you. And I'm going to show you that I still believe in our beauty. I believe in our capacity to make a better nation. And so I think that was really, really powerful. And I also want to say it was so cool. Here we are at that inauguration, and Gorman was the thing we talked the most about. Her poem was the thing
that is true. Most about. That is true.
So
I mean,
the power of words is true.
Okay, Isabel, are you available to answer that question?
I am. I feel, first of all, such an honor and it's just so thrilling to be back with you. I have to say that Amanda Gorman was magnificent. She's a living, breathing human bridge between generations and cultures. She's a bridge to the future, and it was thrilling to see her.
We all had this sort of, I feel that it was a collective pride we all felt. Mm-hmm. So, as you know, everybody knows that, that's why I'm getting the Leadership Award this evening, that writers are my rock stars, books are my jam. The books I read and love are one of the ways I get to connect with people I'll never get to meet. And one of the things I most enjoy about the reading process is that a book can be so personal to the reader and yet so universal. So I wanted to know, as writers, is that always your goal, to make that happen, intimacy and universality? Isabel, I'll ask that of you first.
One of the beautiful things is that as writers, our job is to absorb the energies of our era and then to channel them through the subconscious and then reflect them back to the world. So, our words become a mirror that we hold up to humanity. And so we think about humanity, universal, but really we just want to speak to that one person who wants to lose themselves in the story. And that's the beauty of what we do.
I love that, absorbing the energies. So, Cheryl, how would you answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything Isabel said. And I want to say about that, you said cast changed you forever. It changed me forever too. And we're very different people. I love the way that books can be a bridge, that we read a writer's words and we're schooled by them, we're moved by them, we're changed by them. And it allows us to see what we couldn't see before. Those words on the page illuminate new truths for us. And they also illuminate the things that we already knew, but maybe we're afraid to know, or that they bring to consciousness what we had in some ways ignored or buried. I mean, Cast, that is the book this past year I've spent saying to everyone, you must read this book. Because
Absolutely.
I want that I want us universally to have the experience of the wisdom and the truth that Isabel Wilkerson gives us in that book, in the pages of that book.
So, Isabel, I know there's been overwhelming response to that book, and everybody who reads it with an open mind, and many people who didn't even know what they were opening when they started to read it, have been moved in some way by it. People of reason and sanity who can see that the truth is in those pages. How has it impacted you, the rest of the world's reaction to the book?
Well, I have to say that it's been a dreamlike frozen unreality to this book tour that I'm on. I mean, it's been out for 6 months now. It's hard to believe, but in the midst of a pandemic, I've not seen an audience. I'm so accustomed to being able to commune with an audience, read to an audience, to, see their faces, to talk with them about how they're absorbing it, and it's also remote. On the other hand, there are these sort of outsized, unusual things that happen. I mean, right now, I don't know if you're aware of it, but I'm actually in Vogue magazine, British Vogue, which is, an unusual thing. But beyond that, though, it belongs to the audiences and those readers who absorb it and who love it and commune with it and take it for their own. But more beautifully, though, people have responded to it because they can recognize the truths within it, and then they begin to connect the dots themselves. So, after January 6th, what we saw was that desperate response to existential threat, to the perceived birthright, that many people might have felt. And so then readers who have been absorbing this book, they went on social media. They started talking about dominant group status threat. It was all over Twitter. I didn't have to say a word because the book had done the talking and the people had been listening.
Well, I just want to say, Isabel, yes, I know you were in Vogue because I did the same thing that Cheryl just said, telling everybody about this book. And Edward Enninful, who is the editor of British Vogue, I wrote him several times saying, have you read Cass yet? You've got to get Cass. And you should do a piece on Isabel Wilkerson. So I am so happy to see that actually happened.
Oprah, that's one of the reasons we love you so much, we writers, because you're always advocating for us. And we're so honored that you're out there speaking on our behalf.
Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for saying that, because you just said it, though. Once I read something that's great, I literally cannot keep it to myself. And before I had a platform like this, I was the first book that I felt that way about was The Color Purple, and I just carried a backpack around. And when I was going to and from work in the early days in Chicago, I would walk home so I could hand out the book to people who I didn't know. So this is actually better, being able to tell the world and not have to carry around the backpack. The thing that always fascinates me about you writers is your approach to the very beginning of the writing process itself. And I know everybody's approach is different, so I wanted to hear from both of you, what is your approach? Cheryl, is there a physical space you need to be in? Is there a mood set? With music, do you have to eat a certain thing? Is there silence? Is there no silence? What is the process?
Oh, no, I came up the hard way, Oprah. I couldn't be particular about the venue or the atmosphere or the feeling. I had to have discipline and just get to work. And I think the deeper question is, like, where do we begin? How do we begin to figure out what we have to say on the page? And for me, that has always been going deep inside myself and to say, what is the bravest thing, the truest thing, the scariest thing I can say out loud or on the page. And I try to write from that place, because I do think that is, the mission of literature is to tell us who we are. And that can only be done if we're willing to speak and say and write the truth. And there are many different ways of doing that. Isabel writes about a very big truth about our world. I wrote about the truth of my grief and my struggle to find my way back to a sense of wholeness.
Well, that's so interesting. That's why the personal is universal.
Yeah.
Isabel, tell us about your writing process. Tell us about your writing process.
Yeah, so even though the work that I do involves a tremendous amount of research, deep research, both in terms of interviews and research into what has been in archives, I still start in the same place that Cheryl speaks about. I have to commune with myself. I have to examine what is it that I'm trying to say before you even start. Of course, before you even write the first word, you have to do a lot of thinking. I mean, writing is really thinking that goes onto the page or onto the screen. And so I'm constantly taking notes. I'm constantly writing down things. That's how I process the world around me, is to write, to take notes. I mean, a lot of the work is happening at the subconscious level, and I'm trying to capture observations before they evaporate. And for this book, I mean, it's been welling up inside of me for years, and I wanted the world to know what I had discovered, and I couldn't rest until it was out of me, until, I completed the mission. And you asked about the various things that you might do to get through it, and I listened to Tibetan singing bowls to get me through it. At one point, I listened to the music of Philip Glass. I was doing all of these things to get through it, because the writing can be so challenging, and you have to go to such a deep place within yourself, and you don't always know if you're going to be able to do it yet again. You don't know if you can harness all of that energy, and yet somehow there's this alchemy that occurs within the writer that allows it to emerge. Thank goodness.
And does that alchemy respond to deadlines? Because I've heard writers always talk about deadlines. I was thinking, if you have a deadline, that would absolutely make it worse in my mind, because how do you write to somebody else's timeline? Cheryl, you're smiling.
Well, I'm so comforted to hear what Isabel is saying, because really, and pretty much every writer I know, we say it's so hard, and I don't know ever that I can do it again, and so there's always that sense of doubt and fear, and I think avoidance. That's why so many writers need deadlines, because if you just say, listen, I'm going to kind of float around and figure out the story I'm going to tell, there's a time and a place for that. There's also a time and a place to say, okay, I'm going to have these pages in by this date, because it is work that is better to avoid than to do. At least it feels like that at first. And so, yeah, a deadline helps me.
Cheryl, I've known you now for almost a decade, and so much has changed in your life since you wrote Wild in 2012. I think we can share with our audience here tonight of Poets and Writers that when you first came to my house and we were interviewing in my backyard for Super Soul, promoting Wild, and also as a book club selection, you told me later that you had gone to, I think it was the Salvation Army or Goodwill.
Goodwill.
To get the Goodwill, to get the shirt you were wearing for the show. And you were so... Yes. And you were talking about, like, you just wish you could get an office or something. I was like, girl, you can have more than an office once this book starts selling. So your life has changed so much, not just in terms of, what you're physically able to acquire. Did you ever imagine that your story, letting readers into the most vulnerable personal parts of your life, would end up empowering so many? Or maybe that's why you wrote it.
Well, yeah, my book had been out about a month when we spoke. It was already a bestseller, but I didn't get paid yet. And so, yeah, I was broke, and I needed a new shirt because I was going to meet you. So I bought a new old shirt at Goodwill. And, but yeah, what's so funny about that question, did you ever imagine, did you ever, that the book would reach so many people? Of course not. I think no writer can be sitting at his or her laptop thinking, this is going to be a bestseller, because it just doesn't work that way. You just simply have to work as hard as you can and tell the truest thing, the truest story you can tell, and do your work, and don't worry about what happens. And yet, of course, what every writer is working toward, like both Isabel and I have said, is we do want to connect. We do want people to see themselves in our work. We want people to see the world in a new way because they read a sentence or a paragraph or a page we wrote. And so I have always been really ambitious. I always set about for my life and my work to have an impact. And as a woman, that can be hard to say, but for whatever reason, as a little girl, I always just said, I want to bring beauty and truth into the world through my writing. And so I'm going to keep faith with that work. And so, of course, everything glorious that has happened with Wild has been a grand surprise. And yet also, I put years into making that happen. So both things can be true.
both are true. So, final question to both of you. The great Cicely Tyson just released a memoir before her passing called Just As I Am. And in that book, she talks about how every character she ever played left her with something, taught her something about herself. And I'm wondering, once the two of you release your books into the world and have written the last sentence and release your books into the world, what does the book leave you with? Does it leave you with something? Isabel?
Completion, for sure. You feel that your mission was accomplished. Something that was inside of you that needed to come out has now gone out into the world, and then you sit and wait to see how it's received. You sit and wait to see how the readers are absorbing it. It's not complete until it finds its audience. And so there's a lot that's out of your control once you put it out into the world. And you just hope it will find its audience. You hope it will find people who will love it and appreciate it for what it is, and that it can somehow inspire them. I so love the definition that Tolstoy gave to what art is. He said art is the transfer of emotion from one person to another. I think that's the most beautiful description of art, because that's truly what it is. It's that person, whatever the art that individual is creating, that is coming from deep within themselves, in hopes that it will find another who will appreciate and feel and share that same emotion. And so that's what I'm always hoping when it goes out into the world. But, the idea of being able to find that person, to commune with that person, to see that someone has been changed by it. I mean, I'm hearing from so many people who say that they see the world differently because of this book. I mean, I hear it all the time, that they literally see the world differently than they did before. And that's the most that anyone can ever hope from a book that they produced.
Yeah, I can actually say that. That would be my testimony, too, about Caste. It changed the way I see the world. So, Cheryl, your answer to that question is?
Yeah, I think that it's what Isabel said, the way your book, once it's in the world, it becomes its own thing. And it's really the readers who make the meaning of the book by, it becomes part of their story as well. But I also want to say, just that very, very intimate relationship we as writers, as authors have with our books. I think sometimes people think that an author sits down and says, this is what I have to say, and we write it and then put it out. But what writing a book is really about, I think, is a journey of really, I learned so much from myself as I write any of my books. I think even something like Wild, which is a memoir, you think, I know the plot of my own life. Well, it turns out I didn't. There were so many things that I ended up writing about in all of my books that surprised me and that schooled me and that brought me to a place I could never, ever, ever have gone had I not been writing that book. And it was a discovery, and it was a surprise, and it was a revelation. And so even if the book doesn't do anything in the world, it's changed me. It's taught me something really important, and usually made me a better person. In fact, in every one of my books, I've been better after having written it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you both, Isabel and Cheryl, for joining me in this conversation. I'm so sorry we couldn't all be together, dressed up in our cute shoes.
and shirts from Goodwill.
Yeah, and shirts from Goodwill, celebrating this evening. Also, thank you to Executive Director Melissa Ford Gradle and the entire Poets and Writers Board and organization for making this happen. I'm so sorry that we couldn't all be together. I deeply appreciate your dedication to supporting those who use the pen to create lasting cultural change in our world, and I celebrate you all. Thank you.
When I want to know what's happening with writers in the States, I turn to Poets and Writers. For decades, I've known Poets and Writers as a source of trustworthy information for writers, and it just gets better with age.
One of the grandest moments
as a poet was when my name and address was added to the Poets and Writers Directory. It was one of those milestones that says, she's a professional. You can pay her for her work. The directory opened doors. And of course, it was the grand party they gave me when I got the Jackson Poetry Prize in 2017.
I remember when I was an undergrad at Berkeley, I'd go down to Cody's Books on Telegraph Avenue, and I discovered Poets and Writers magazine, and I just remember thinking it was like finding the treasure map, the profiles, and all of the listings of magazines, contests. I just felt like this is worth sacrificing pizza money.
When Poets and Writers decided to expand their readings and workshops funding program into Tucson, it was just the lifeline that Casa Libre and other literary organizations in town needed to keep our programs going. In particular, it helped us to provide funding for LGBTQ+, BIPOC, and female writers in our reading series at Casa Libre. So I will always be grateful to Poets and Writers for the access, community, and funding you provide to organizations like Casa Libre and to writers like me. Thank you.
Being profiled in Poets and Writers was a huge honor because it meant that Poets and Writers has been there for my whole journey. From when I was an up-and-coming writer to when I was featured for my first book to now featured for my latest book. But most importantly, Poets and Writers was the engine that helped me understand that my role as a writer is more than just trying to be published. And it's about helping other writers. And that is the echo that the institution and the magazine creates in my own head, the need to be present for others.
Wasn't that just fantastic? Writers, poets, readers, book-loving friends everywhere, thank you so much for joining us. There has never been a more important time to support the vital and necessary organizations that sustain writers. If you've contributed this evening, thank you. If you have not, please make a contribution right now. Just like democracy itself, organizations like Poets and Writers only thrive with our active support. So if you care about writers and writing, pitch in to keep this amazing work going.
There was something for me a bit lonely when I started out writing, and Poets and Writers became a kind of companion. It was the magazine that introduced me to how publishing works. It was the magazine that gave me information about workshops and conferences so that I could apply to them. It was the magazine that reported what other people had won, which for me was a source of inspiration because it meant that I saw what was possible.
I was teaching high school in a small town in Massachusetts, where the last thing I understood was that there were other people like me trying to make poems, trying to figure out what to do with poems once you've made them. One day, though, I went to the bookstore and discovered a copy of Poets and Writers. And immediately, a whole world was opened up to me. I had no idea there were other living writers making lives with their writing, nor did I know of all the other opportunities, workshops, conferences, contests that were out there for sharing one's work and getting feedback. I'm grateful to this day to Poets and Writers for telling me what I needed most to know back then, which is that I wasn't alone in wanting to give shape to a life through language. Thank you, Poets and Writers.
The Poets and Writers Readings and Workshops program has been of great help to me as a writer and educator over the years. Recently, it has helped me weather this COVID pandemic time. Without a doubt, the most recent Poets and Writers Project grant has had a strong impact on my career. This grant gave me the idea to go forward with virtual online events.
Over the years, Poets and Writers has given me vital support and wonderful opportunities to connect with people through the Readings and Workshops program. Most recently, in a virtual program, I read my poetry, 2 violinists played experimental music, and a Japanese sculptor did a walkthrough of his latest creations. This remarkable event is just one of many supported by Poets and Writers.
When I first started looking for places to submit my first collection of poetry 20 years ago, I didn't know where else to turn except for Poets and Writers. This is just on the cusp of the web, so the best thing that I did was cut out little ads and deadlines and paste them on a piece of paper so that I could keep organized where all my deadlines were. And Poets and Writers provided that access for me. 20 years later, this happened.
I have only ever really loved two magazines in my life. Sassy Magazine, which taught me how to be a teenage girl, and Poets and Writers Magazine, which taught and continues to teach me how to be a writer, how to be a reader, and how to be a good part of the literary community.
To close us out, here again is the Cornelius Edie Trio. Good night.
Old John Henry's hammer rang. He shook the town at the box sang. Everybody know all over the land. All it takes is one good man. All it takes is one good man. Plant your feet and take a stand. Laugh at the devil straight in his eye. Pluck the truth from his alibi. Can you resist? Can you resist? The odds were 1,000 to 1. The mob had plenty and he had none. No one would have blamed him if he ran. He heated the car for one good man. All it takes is one good man. Raise your voice and take a stand. Mock the devil straight to his face. Bring his chaos into grace. Can't you resist? Can't you resist? Can't you resist? Henry's hammer laid him low, but he knew he had to take that blow to make a point all over the land. All it takes is one good man. All it takes is one good man. Mercy and justice hand in hand. Kick the devil to the other side. Sift the truth from his little white lie. Me and my baby sitting in the rain, waiting on the sun to shine. Mr. Blues, go back to from where you came, waiting on the sun to shine. Want to know how it feels in the captain seat, waiting on the sun to shine. Drop me off with joy and satisfaction needs, waiting on the sun to shine. Say, oh, hanging in the sky, waiting on the sun to shine. Sun starts shining, moon got too high, waiting on the sun to shine. Waiting on the sun to shine. Second time, listening to the blues, waiting on the sun to shine. About to graduate to something new, waiting on the sun to shine. Me and my baby at the end of the world, waiting on the sun to shine. That's over the cracks and give it a whirl, waiting on the sun to shine. Mr. Blues, you done had your fun, waiting on the sun to shine. Anybody like that will miss your son, waiting on the sun to shine.